segment of the Taboo Emotional blog, we'll explore hate. And to begin this exploration, I want to bring in a couple of truths again. Number one, no human emotion is good or bad. It is a natural uprising from a particular environmental circumstance. Once it is given rise to, once an emotion takes form, it's very much like a sound. You know, if you've ever played with iron filings on a steel or copper plate, when you play a certain sound, the filings arrange themselves in a particular geometric pattern. And if you know the language, if you know the visual language of sound, because this is a form of synesthesia, this is a form in which sound becomes shape, which means that there is a corollary language between sound and shape. If you know the language of sound, the visual language, by looking at the shape of the filings, you will ascertain the sound that was played. And this is very much one of the purposes of our emotions. Our emotions are like iron filings or water, and they take the shape of the sound around us. And the sound around us, if you imagine that there's just one core energy frequency that's flowing through all of reality and all of humanity, and that every single thing in the environment reverberates in an interference pattern to create a sound, and that sound in its interference pattern, like in resonance water, where you drop a petal or a pebble in a pond, and you drop another pebble in a pond and another pebble, and they send out ripples back and forth, forming an interference pattern. And from that you can detect, if you have the measuring devices, by taking a square meter of water within a matter of a minute of all those things, you can detect the shore, you can detect how big the pebbles were, you can know how big the water was, you can learn all about the environment from the pattern in a given segment. It's a holographic wave going outwards and inwards. And this is what our emotions do, because we are always in an environment. We are hearing the universal sound reverberating through and in reaction to objects in our mental, emotional, physical, social environment, and reverberating through our body and through all the things around us. That sound comes towards us and interacts with the interference pattern of our emotional body, which generates a pattern like those iron filings. And from that pattern, we can determine everything in the inner environment and everything in the environment around us. And the inner environment determines what is exaggerated and what is diminished. But it's not destroyed or created. It's just, every human being places different emphases on different things. Those emphases can also, the pattern of emphasis is a direct representation of the history of environments in the past. And so in this level, our emotions are a sacred looking glass through which to observe. This is the design of my environment. Now, the answer to a hostile, painful, contracting emotion is several-fold. We can accept the hostility, the fearful, the unknown, all that within the environment. Or we can use it to see and go out and change one of the variables, either in our individual environment. An example would be, I had certain images playing in my dreams last night. I have certain environmental shapes in my emotions waking up. They feel painful. I look back, what is the cause? And I think, don't watch a nightmare cartoon before bed. Change the channel, watch a meditation instead. The emotions change. Emotions are a symptom of the environment, and it is the environment, not the emotions, to work with. Now, there's two levels of that. We can work to heal our past environment, recreating the past through meditation, etc., so that, for example, if we have been induced into hatred, terror, trauma, rage, 60% of our past life, and as a result, 60% of our emphasis in the present is on exaggerating, not just by focusing on possible threats of trauma, which of course tunes other things out. And this is completely intelligent. In other words, if you have been, brought to a point of life-threatening danger repeatedly in a particular form, you have a reptilian brain that will zero in on how that could repeat itself and try and avoid it and also focus on it. And if you do this consciously, if you say, there's a certain kind of pattern, there's a certain kind of person that every time I meet them, I end up freaking out and my life goes, way down and I'm in, jeopardy, I'm re-triggered and stuff. So I am going to avoid those types of people. And there's a lot of them around. Let me try here, let me move here, let me try traveling, let me try this, and then it's done. It's like, that's the purpose of the pattern. So when the environment has truly shifted, for example, a child who was abused in the family, but who's now an adult in an environment where that abuse is not happening and is not likely to happen, it makes sense to reprogram the self, to update, to go back into those memories, release the emotional patterns that are being held there to give us a message. The message is, you are not safe. The environment is sick. Do something. That's the message. When that has changed, you go back and you change the message and you come back into the present, and they're in the air, but they're from a distance. Maybe it's your neighbor's child who's being traumatized, not you. It's not a totally safe environment. The pattern is still present in the culture, in the country. It's not at all safe for that child. But you don't have to emphasize it that much, except if you're called to be of service. You know what it's like to be that child, and so you could go and help. You may also know what it's like to be those parents, immature, untrained, carrying residues of abuse themselves, unsupported by the culture, shamed for every mistake, in panic, in a winner-loser paradigm in which losers are shamed rather than helped. You may know what it's like to be those parents. And you may help that situation either by helping the parent if they're able and willing to be helped, or helping the child if they're able and willing to be helped, or helping the community or the cultural ecosphere. Changing objects in any of the outer environment can help the pattern. But the thing to be absolutely clear on is that the pattern is not your enemy. The pattern is not your enemy. It is a messenger that is telling you about the objects in the environment so that you can act. So, what is the message of hate? When you feel hate, when someone feels hatred, what are the objects that they are experiencing that have a probability of inducing this state? I want to also make one more distinction, and that's the distinction between the sound that comes out of the environment and the sound that is retained and grown. Because once those filings arrange themselves around a certain instance, if that's a traumatic instant, it may be frozen in that shape and need to be re-dissipated so that new emotions can come in the present. But there's also another thing that can happen, and that is what happens when, through repeated trauma, our identity, our sense of self and our identity is so unstable, is so unreliable relative to the pattern that is repeatedly induced by a stably sick environment, that an environment where the acoustics are such that this pattern is repeated and repeated consistently, where the abuse is the most consistent element in the environment, then the identity needing desperately to fight off chaos, the terror of the unknown, is the biggest enemy for human growth. So we need to establish a baseline of stability. This is why the culture is so fanatical about maintaining the norm. People freak out when there's no order. No order. What we need is an order, and then we need a deviation from that order and return to order. That's the pattern of growth. And so when a child or a newly forming identity has hate or rage as the most stable shape in their environment, they will actually form their identity around the emotional pattern that is sounding at them, that is created by the objects around them. and they will become that, meaning I am hate, I am fear, because now there's peace, there's stability. I am this is solid, this is being created. Now, when this happens, now the identity needs to sustain itself. And so even when the trauma triggers are no longer present, the person will still they'll remember the shape, so that they feel stable, so that they know who they are. So this is where you see someone who is abused. It's an erratic pattern. They feel completely jumped around, and then they form the identity. I am hate. I am bad. I am this. And then something shifts in the environment. There's a nice day at the circus, for example. But then the person feels insecure because the sound has suddenly shifted, and now they're not feeling that stability. But when the identity is formed around the painful, intense emotion, the bottom line intense emotion, then the person will actually create stuff. They're at the nice picnic, so they'll push some happy kid or whatever who's ruining their state of hate. They'll just shove them and make them cry. So you see, I'm a hateful person. And what they're doing is they're creating the resonance. They're producing the reality so that they feel certain, so that they reduce chaos in the environment. And this is why it's so, so important to protect children in a forming identity from the intensity of negative dissonance, so that they have a chance to form their identity in who they really are, their beauty, their gifts, their strengths, their love, their nature to bond and grow. That's our human nature. I mean, if you give a child that environment, and they will choose that. They will gravitate towards that. Even as an infant, they'll crawl over towards the happy, loving, safe space and not the painful rage and stuff. But if a child cannot escape the pain, the rage, etc., and that is more constant than anything else, they will end up clinging and maybe lose an entire lifetime because they can't ever let go, because the panic is too high facing that unknown. And as a culture, we just don't have the education, the technology, the empathy, the compassion to help that individual make the transition back into a positive and healthy identity in which they get to be their true self. Now, this is actually, ironically, one of the conditions of hate. So, one is not being able to win, where everything good in you that's wanting to grow, that's wanting to come out, is being blocked, is being punished, is being persecuted. That's one condition of hate. When you try and love and be helpful and be nice to a bully, to a sociopathic parent, to a sociopathic teacher, and you try and bring love to that situation and you are slammed down. Basically, the nicer and the more giving you are, the more you are beaten down. Why? Because they are maintaining their identity. See, this is when someone establishes a baseline where they need hate and they need rage and they need all of this to maintain a sense of safety and a protection from the unknown, because that's the most stable thing in their past and present. You go and you invite them into love, and you're inviting them into chaos. You're inviting them into the unknown. You're inviting them into an unstable environment which threatens to expose them to a re-triggering of their trauma, of their core panic, of their lack of identity. And so that person fights off the love as the enemy of certainty, which is the core requirement to grow. And people in a state of hate and rage and revenge can grow. If they can maintain the steadiness of the state and this consistency, someone in a sociopathic state can grow. They can get smarter, they can get better at hurting people, they can grow. They can get better at surviving, and this is the purpose of this brain, is to keep the person alive. Now, it's in the interest of the culture, it's in the interest of the world to give every individual, a place that is more stably attuned to them in love, in grace, in creativity than in hate. For this reason, if the culture has no kindness, no character, no culture, no education, no intelligence, and just disposes of its citizens by not managing the traumatic states of its infants, then that culture will breed what we are breeding in our culture, which is a percentage of people in a sociopathic state who are holding onto negative states to protect themselves from uncertainty, who do not trust the instability, the lies, the betrayals of the positive states within a culture that is not very intelligent in this area. Now, we have created individuals that appear to be our enemies. We could really say that we have betrayed those individuals. We are those individuals' enemies. But it's more complex because we on an individual level may be very kind and caring and want to help someone in that state. You have to understand why. The context of someone holding on to a negative state and why. Helplessness is one. The helplessness to be oneself and the requirement that in order to survive, an individual has to hold on to a negative state for a baseline of certainty, because the chaos and the despair and hopelessness and helplessness and terror, the paralysis of chaos is so intense when things are not looking the way they should be looking for someone that they will pick hate. And now there's peace. I hate. I can maintain this environment in part because this is the natural feeling I feel when every way I'm trying to win, every way I'm trying to love, every time I'm trying to be myself, I'm being whacked down by a world that doesn't get it. Powerlessness. Powerlessness is one condition of hate. Hurt is another condition. You are hurt and powerless. Betrayed. When you see that someone could help you, they could be more honest, they could own up that this was their issue, but they're not. They're a coward. They are betraying you to a chaos of hate. When you see that, that's a condition of hate. Powerlessness, betrayal, hurt. When something you love deeply is destroyed in a powerless and helpless state, it is a condition of hate. You love your little brother and sister, and someone is systematically torturing that little brother and sister, number one. Number two, you cannot do anything about it. Number three, you are being lied to and betrayed on all sides. No one is coming forward to protect them. People say, oh, they'll get over it. That's a lie. Oh, that's not my business. That's a lie. Oh, I'm too busy. That's a lie. Oh, we don't have resources for that. That is often a lie. Because if you don't, you can get help. There's something very wrong with a world that pretends it doesn't have enough resources to help someone in pain. That is a lie. This is a very good recipe for hate. And it is why many of us have the visceral memories of hate or hate in the present day. Aware that everything beautiful about us is regulated, bisilated, avoided, rejected, criticized, and complained out of existence. You come up with something beautiful you want to create and give. A piece of architecture, a piece of art, and it's like, well, do you have a permit? No, isn't this self-evident? Well, we don't care if it is or not. We don't care if it does good or not. Do you have a permit? Well, it takes, you want to create this out of your heart right now. Well, it takes 6 months and we'll review it. And it takes $1,000, and it takes this, and it takes that, and then you need this, and then you need that, and then you have some neighbors say, well, I don't like that creative project. And you feel like there's no hope. Everything beautiful and new in me is being crushed down. There's no empathy. No one is saying, wow, you are giving birth to who you are. And it's our job in this environment to make a safe and welcome space for the beauty that is you and the uniqueness that is you. Let's work together to see that if we can't do it in this way, we'll do it in this way. No. We don't care. We don't care about your state. We don't care about your feeling. And you're pushed down. You're pushed down. And I want to do this. Well, you can't. Why? That's just the way it's done. I want to talk about this. I don't like this. Children are seen but not heard. If you put up a fuss, we're going to punish you. We're going to beat you. And it just gets knocked down and knocked down and knocked down. You have terror. Terror is also often a condition for hate. The terror that if you be something beautiful, if you take your own shape, you will be persecuted. You will be bullied. You will be humiliated. If you follow your own flow, a sensitive boy who starts wanting to explore makeup or dress in a way that feels beautiful to them, that follows an artistic spirit, is in an environment in which there is a culture that is terrified of the shame of this label of gay, which the person may or may not be. But they want to explore that direction, but they can't. And it's cut off. And their own parents cut them down because there's so much fear of what they would deal with in a school ground that is even more sociopathic. You have hate as a natural byproduct. So what's the remedy of hate? How do you respond if you have hate or someone has hate? First of all, you identify the objects. Where are you powerless? Where is your person and friend powerless? What is suppressing and blocking their power? What is suffocating what wanted to emerge and was lost? What is the wound? What is the terror, the wound, the helplessness? And can that be remedied in the environment, not in the person? You don't attack. Someone who's in a negative state is in a lot of pain. Caused, initially, sometimes subsequently maintained in the sense that there's the terror of chaos, but initially always caused on the outside, always. All emotion is a symptom of the objects in the environment, which means that the adults around a child initially did not do their job. That's what it means. Didn't know how, didn't care enough, actively exploited and abused the child to remedy their own hate and rage. Because when you as a parent are in hate and in rage and feel powerless, when you have an identity of hate because you've been hurt and blocked, you got an innocent child there, you just hate that child, and you'll replicate the pattern in the child. Now the child has experienced so much hate, and that's the only thing stable, so they will hold on to the new identity. They'll try and copy dad, copy mom. The remedy is in the environment. The remedy is in the technology, in the acknowledgement. So there's a couple of things that can be done to lift hate off. One is an acknowledgement of culpability. We lied to you, we didn't do what we could, we put this before this, we let you down. We didn't ask for help, we weren't committed. We lied to you. Those lies can be owned. Apologies can be given. That's one level. The betrayal can turn to an honoring of the truth and an honoring of the hate, that this is our hate. This is the hate we in the environment gave to you. Number two, what was killed by that betrayal? What was denied by that betrayal? We can do something about that. We can take a stand to redeem, to make amends. We can establish a safe, clear framework of new agreement, of new commitment to protect what is innocent, what is beautiful. We can take a stand for that individual and their right to be uniquely beautiful and authentic. And we can take a stand for fighting the bureaucracy, the cultural norms, the bureaucracy, the exploitive protocol, the gap between the enormous intensity of a multi-trillion-dollar infrastructure that is all pitted in some areas against an individual, with not a single person taking a stand for that individual. We can help give a stand. And what happens is hate dissolves. Hate is a symptom of an unhealthy environment. It is a message that the environment needs to change. And it is a message that, if unheeded, turns to an externalization of the internal wound, which is when we get Columbine, which is when we get children shooting, when we get suicides, when we get bombs. This is an externalization of a wound given to innocent children in a culture that did not want to hear the message. So that's hate, and that's its medicine. I'd like to just take a moment and honor the amount of pain that so many individuals who have experienced these environmental forces are in.